If you feel like everywhere you look someone is talking about or trying intermittent fasting, well, you're not alone. It's definitely moved from a niche wellness thing into the mainstream conversation.
It really has. It's gained immense popularity, hasn't it? Fueled by anecdotes and often pretty bold claims about its benefits.
Yeah,
But with that kind of buzz, it becomes really essential to, cut through the noise and see what the actual science says.
exactly. And you've provided us with this great stack of sources for this deep dive, research studies, reviews, articles, really digging into the mechanisms.
Hmm.
And our mission today is to pull out the most important insights. We want to figure out what the science really supports about intermittent fasting.
Hmm.
What are the benefits we can confidently point to?
Oh, yay.
What are the potential downsides? And ultimately, based on these sources, does it live up to the hype? And how might you, the listener, figure out if it's even something to consider?
It's certainly more nuanced than just a simple trend. Understanding the specific findings and the caveats within these sources is crucial for getting the full picture.
Okay.
So let's unpack what we learned.
All right, let's dive right into the fundamentals then. What exactly is intermittent fasting? Because it's fundamentally different from just dieting, isn't it?
It is, yeah. The core idea of intermittent fasting, or IF, isn't really about what specific foods you eat, but much more about when you eat them.
Okay.
It's an eating pattern that cycles between periods where you consume food and periods of voluntary fasting.
And you mentioned our bodies might actually be kind of wired for this rhythm from like an evolutionary perspective.
That's a key point the sources touch on. Yes, if you think back to our ancestors, food wasn't always available 24/7 like it often is now.
Right, no pantry down the hall.
Exactly. Our bodies evolved mechanisms to function efficiently even after going without food for hours or maybe even days. This is quite a contrast to modern life where many people eat frequently throughout their waking hours.
And that's where this idea of metabolic switching comes in, right?
Yeah.
That sounds important.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting physiologically. After you haven't eaten for a certain number of hours, usually around 10 to 12 hours, your body depletes its immediate energy stores.
Which are mostly sugar.
Primarily glucose, yeah, from carbohydrates. Once the sugar reserves are low, the body effectively flips a switch and starts tapping into its fat stores for energy instead.
Oh.
That transition is called metabolic switching.
So you burn through the quick fuel, then move to the stored reserves, the fat, and the sources describe a few main ways people actually put this into practice.
They do. The most commonly discussed type, and probably what most people mean when they say they're doing IF, is time-restricted eating, TRE for short.
TRE, okay.
This just means you limit your eating to a specific window of hours each day. For instance, fasting for 16 hours and eating within an 8-hour window. That's the very popular 16.8 method.
Right, 16.8, I've heard that one a lot. So an 8-hour window to eat, and then 16 hours of water or black coffee, things like that.
Exactly. Non-caloric drinks only during the fasting period.
Okay. What are the other main patterns mentioned?
Well, there's alternate day fasting, or ADF.
Alternate day.
Yeah. Here, you alternate between days of eating, normally they call them feast days, and fast days, where you significantly cut calories, maybe consuming only around 500 calories total, often in just one meal.
Wow, okay, 500 calories every other day. That sounds pretty intense.
It's definitely a more challenging approach for many. And then there's also modified fasting, often seen as the 5.2 diet.
5.2, so 5 days normal, 2 days fasting?
Kind of. You eat normally for 5 days a week, and then on 2 non-consecutive days, you reduce your calorie intake significantly, similar to the fast days in ADF, maybe around 500, 600 calories.
Okay, so there's definitely some flexibility in how you structure it. Now, beyond just, potentially eating fewer calories overall because you're squeezing your eating time,
Right.
the sources suggest there are other, maybe more powerful things happening in the body.
That's right. While reducing overall calorie intake is certainly a major factor if weight loss occurs, the research points to other potential mechanisms unique to those fasting periods that might contribute to the health benefits.
Like aligning with our internal body clock. I think you mentioned chrononutrition.
Exactly. This links to the body's natural circadian rhythm. Some sources note that eating across very long periods, like say 12, 14, even 15 hours a day, might actually disrupt this natural rhythm.
Which a lot of people probably do without thinking about it.
Probably. So, by compressing the eating window with IF, you potentially help align your food intake more closely with your body's natural sleep-wake cycle. And this alignment itself might have positive effects on metabolism.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Hmm?
What else is going on at a deeper level? You mentioned something fascinating.
Autophagy.
Ah, yes, autophagy. Think of this as the cell's built-in recycling and cleanup system.
Like cellular spring cleaning. Pretty much, yeah. During autophagy, cells break down and remove damaged proteins, old organelles, other unwanted bits and pieces. Fasting is one of the primary known triggers for this process.
And scientists can actually see this happening.
They can. What's really compelling is that researchers have been able to reproduce this cellular cleansing mechanism in the lab, studying how it works at a really fundamental level.
That's amazing. So we can actually trigger and observe this internal cleanup crew getting to work.
And the potential implications are huge. Scientists are actively researching how stimulating autophagy might be beneficial, particularly in the context of, say, neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
How so?
Well, in those diseases, the buildup of misfolded proteins is a key problem. Autophagy could potentially help clear out those harmful protein aggregates.
So it's not just about surface level stuff like weight loss. It could be impacting cellular health and maybe even long-term brain function.
That's the really exciting area of research, though, much is still being explored, especially the direct translation to humans. The sources also mention other hypotheses being investigated, things like potential positive shifts in the gut microbiome, or even simply that adopting a structured pattern like IF encourages better overall lifestyle habits, like improving sleep quality.
Hmm. Okay, that's a lot going on under the hood. Let's move from the how it might work to the what it achieves. What are the science-backed benefits? What do the sources consistently show?
Okay, the most robust findings definitely center around weight loss and improvements in body composition. Studies consistently demonstrate mild to moderate weight loss with various IF methods, generally ranging from about 1% to 8% of initial body weight.
And how does that stack up against, say, just traditional calorie counting day in, day out?
The sources generally indicate that IF is often comparable in effectiveness to traditional continuous calorie restriction CCR when it comes to the amount of weight loss.
Comfortable, okay.
But the meta-analysis that looks specifically at longer-term studies, 6 months or more in adults with overweight and obesity, that gave some more specific insights into what kind of weight was lost.
Ah, body composition.
Yeah.
What did those numbers tell us?
Well, that meta-analysis found statistically significant reductions in body weight, on average about 2.84 kilograms.
Which is about 6 pounds.
Roughly, yes.
Huh?
Also, significant drops in BMI, which relates weight to height, fat mass, an average reduction of over 3 kilograms, so mostly fat.
That's key.
Waist circumference down almost 4 centimeters on average. And importantly, visceral fat, that deep abdominal fat.
Okay, so translating those numbers, people are losing noticeable amounts of weight. And crucially, it seems to be primarily fat, including that really unhealthy visceral fat around the organs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And touching on the concern about losing muscle mass during weight loss.
Yeah, that's always a worry.
One study specifically noted that participants did not experience significant loss of lean muscle mass. Now, it's worth mentioning the meta-analysis did show a small reduction in fat-free mass compared to a control group.
So a little nuance there.
A little nuance, yes. It might depend on the specific IF protocol or the study population, but the general emphasis in the sources is on preserving muscle better than some might expect while targeting fat loss.
Okay. Moving beyond weight, what about cardiometabolic health? Things like blood sugar, cholesterol, blood pressure.
This is another area where the sources show really significant promise. IF has been consistently linked to improved blood sugar control.
How so?
Things like reduced insulin resistance, meaning your body uses the insulin it produces more effectively, and lower levels of fasting blood sugar and HbA1c.
And just quickly, HbA1c, that's the long-term blood sugar measure, right?
That's right. It reflects your average blood sugar over the past 2 to 3 months. So seeing improvements there is a really big deal, especially for people at risk of or already managing type 2 diabetes.
And wasn't there a really striking finding about blood sugar in one source? Something about how fast it worked?
Yes, that was quite remarkable. New research highlighted that simply incorporating a 16-hour fasting period each day, so 16.8, without changing total calories or the types of food eaten.
Without cutting calories.
Correct. In adults with type 2 diabetes, this led to significant improvements in blood sugar control in just 3 days.
3 days, wow.
Yeah. They spent more time in their target blood sugar range and had fewer dangerous fluctuations. This rapid benefit was directly attributed to the fasting period itself, not just calorie reduction.
That is incredibly fast for that kind of impact.
It is, and this kind of finding contributes to the idea suggested in one of the sources that IF, when done under medical supervision, could potentially help some adults with type 2 diabetes reduce their reliance on insulin therapy.
That's a huge potential benefit for people managing that condition.
Right.
Okay, what about cholesterol and blood pressure?
The sources also point to potential improvements in cholesterol profiles. This includes possible reductions in total cholesterol, triglycerides, which is another type of fat in your blood, and LDL cholesterol, often called the bad cholesterol.
And the good cholesterol, HDL.
Potentially an increase in HDL, the good kind. The meta-analysis specifically confirms significant decreases in triglycerides and significant increases in HDL compared to control groups, which is great for heart health.
Okay, and blood pressure.
For blood pressure, the meta-analysis found a significant reduction in diastolic blood pressure, that's the bottom number, when compared to both control groups and even compared to continuous calorie restriction groups.
Interesting, so maybe better than just cutting calories there.
Potentially for diastolic, yes. Though they found no significant effect on systolic blood pressure, the top number, compared to control groups in that analysis.
Okay, so putting it together.
Yeah.
Positive shifts across key indicators: blood sugar, insulin sensitivity, triglycerides, HDL, diastolic blood pressure. This collectively points towards a reduction in risk factors for heart disease.
Absolutely. Those cardiometabolic benefits seem quite well supported by the sources we looked at.
Are there other potential benefits mentioned? Maybe things that are less strongly supported, but still areas of interesting research?
Yes, definitely. There are other intriguing areas explored, though often with the caveat that more research is needed, particularly robust human trials.
Like what?
Sources mention research looking at effects on thinking and memory. Some animal studies showed improved working memory, and some human studies suggested improvements in verbal memory.
And physical performance. Any edge for athletes?
Some studies suggest IF might help with body recomposition. So, losing fat while maintaining muscle mass, particularly noted in young men. There's also some animal data suggesting better endurance in mice models.
Okay.
Reduced inflammation is another area mentioned in some studies, and one source made a broader claim about potential protective effects on organs against chronic diseases, like inflammatory bowel disease or even some cancer.
That sounds more exploratory.
Very much so. Highlighted as an area of ongoing exploration rather than, a definitively proven benefit across the board.
And we touched on that autophagy link earlier, connecting it to things like longevity or neurodegenerative conditions.
Right. Those are really exciting hypotheses suggesting potential protective effects against age-related decline or conditions like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, possibly through mechanisms like autophagy.
But still hypotheses.
Largely, yes. The sources are quite clear that this is still mostly theoretical or based on early-stage research. We need more long-term human studies to understand if these potential mechanisms translate into real clinical outcomes.
Okay. So solid evidence for weight and cardiometabolic health improvements, a lot of promising areas being explored further, but it's clearly not a magic bullet, and it's not right for everyone. Let's talk about the potential downsides and risks.
Absolutely crucial part of the picture. While it can be beneficial for many, IF definitely comes with potential downsides, especially when you're first starting out.
Like what? What's common?
The most common side effects reported in the sources are things like increased hunger and cravings.
Which makes sense, I suppose, when you're suddenly restricting when you can eat.
Exactly. Headaches and lightheadedness are also very common initially. These are often linked to dips in blood sugar and maybe some dehydration. Usually, they improve within the first week or two as the body adapts.
Okay, so potentially temporary. What else?
Fatigue and low energy are reported by some, again, potentially from blood sugar shifts or sometimes sleep disturbances. Though, interestingly, some people report feeling more energetic once they adapt.
And mood changes. Feeling irritable.
Yes, irritability is another common one, often going hand in hand with the hunger and fatigue. One study even noted women reported more irritability during fasting periods, but also, interestingly, a higher sense of achievement afterwards.
Huh. An interesting trade-off.
Maybe. Digestive issues can also pop up, things like indigestion, diarrhea, nausea, or bloating as your eating patterns shift.
Okay. Anything else common?
Bad breath is a possible, though maybe less common, side effect. Sometimes linked to dehydration, Or it can happen as the body burns fat and produces ketones like acetone.
Ah, bad breath from burning fat. Okay, adding that to the list of interesting possibilities.
Yes, it's actually a sign that metabolic switching is happening. Sleep disturbances, like difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, were reported by a notable percentage in one study, though other studies found no negative effect on sleep quality, so that might vary.
And dehydration.
Yes, initial dehydration and maybe low salt levels can happen as the body adjusts and releases some water and sodium. So, staying well hydrated and ensuring adequate electrolyte intake, especially at the start, is really important.
Okay, so a range of potentially uncomfortable but often temporary effects as your body adjusts. What about more serious concerns? Is malnutrition a risk?
Malnutrition is a serious potential risk, yes, if intermittent fasting is not done properly. This is a major concern with very long fasting periods, or, more commonly, if someone drastically restricts calories during their eating window to the point they aren't getting enough essential nutrients.
So the eating window quality matters.
Hugely. The sources strongly emphasize the need to eat a well-rounded, nutrient-dense diet during your eating periods. You have to ensure you're getting all the vitamins, minerals, protein, and fiber your body needs.
It's definitely not an excuse to just eat junk food for 8 hours straight.
That's a really critical point. And there are specific groups of people for whom IF is generally not recommended or who need strict medical supervision.
Absolutely. The sources are very clear and consistent on this. Intermittent fasting should generally be avoided by anyone who is pregnant or nursing.
Okay.
Also by young children and teens under 18, as their nutritional needs for growth are high. Older adults who already experience weakness should likely avoid it too, and anyone with immunodeficiencies.
What about eating disorders? That's a huge one. Anyone with a current or past history of an eating disorder should steer entirely clear of IF. The restrictive nature can potentially trigger or worsen disordered eating behaviors. That's a non-negotiable contraindication.
That is incredibly important to highlight.
Definitely. Also, people with dementia or a history of traumatic brain injury or post-concussive syndrome are generally advised against it.
And diabetes.
Yeah.
You mentioned potential benefits for type 2, but what about type 1?
Right. It's different for type 1. Individuals with type 1 diabetes, especially those who take insulin, face a significant risk of hypoglycemia, dangerously low blood sugar. So IFS is generally not recommended or would require very close medical supervision and careful planning. Research in this specific group is quite limited.
Okay, so type 1 diabetes on insulin is a major caution zone.
Yes. And really, beyond those specific groups, the most crucial piece of advice echoed across all the sources is this. Anyone with any pre-existing medical condition, heart disease, kidney disease, you name it, or who is taking any regular medications should absolutely consult with their doctor or a qualified healthcare professional before starting IF.
Why is that so critical?
Because IF can significantly impact things like blood sugar levels, blood pressure, and other physiological factors. It can also affect how medications are absorbed or how they work, and medication timing often needs adjustment. So medical guidance isn't just a good idea, it's really essential for safety for a large number of people.
That covers a broad range then.
It does. Other groups who might struggle include shift workers due to their irregular schedules and anyone who absolutely needs to take medication with food at specific, non-flexible times throughout the day.
Makes sense.
And finally, the sources also emphasize just listen to your body. If you try IF and experience prolonged or severe side effects, it's likely a sign that this particular approach just isn't the right fit for you and you should stop.
Understanding those risks and who should avoid it is just as vital as understanding the potential benefits. Okay, so drilling down a bit more, how does intermittent fasting really compare head-to-head with traditional continuous calorie restriction, where you just aim to eat a bit less all day, every day?
Well, as we mentioned, the sources generally suggest they are quite comparable for overall weight loss outcomes for many individuals. If you match the total calorie deficit, the amount of weight loss tends to be similar.
Similar weight loss, okay.
Mhm.
But you hinted there might be other differences.
Yes. As we saw with some findings in the meta-analysis, there's some evolving evidence hinting that IF might offer some unique metabolic advantages beyond just the calorie reduction itself.
Like what, specifically?
Like potentially greater reductions in fat mass relative to lean mass, perhaps more pronounced improvements in insulin sensitivity, and those specific benefits like the diastolic blood pressure reduction and the HDL cholesterol increase that were seen in the meta-analysis when compared directly to continuous calorie restriction.
So, similar overall weight loss, but maybe some distinct health benefits stemming from the fasting period itself.
That's the hypothesis supported by some of the research, yes. that the metabolic switching and other processes triggered by fasting confer benefits beyond just eating fewer calories.
Interesting. Is there anything about adherence? Like which one is easier to stick with?
That's another angle the sources touch on. For some people, the structured on-off nature of EF might actually be easier to adhere to in the long run than the constant vigilance required for tracking calories at every single meal and snack.
So it could be more sustainable for certain lifestyles or personalities.
Potentially, yes. For others, continuous restriction might feel less disruptive. It likely comes down to individual preference and routine.
And are there other established healthy eating approaches mentioned in the sources as alternatives people might consider instead of IF?
Yes, definitely. The Mediterranean diet comes up frequently as a really well-established, science-backed eating pattern.
Right, lots of research on that one.
Tons. It offers significant heart health benefits, reducing the risk of heart attack and stroke, and it's also linked to protection against certain cancers, like colorectal cancer, and even potentially slowing nerve cell loss in conditions like Parkinson's.
And the key difference is,
The key point is that the Mediterranean diet provides these broad health benefits without requiring any specific fasting periods. It focuses on the types of foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fish, healthy fats, rather than the timing.
so that's a great evidence-based option for people who find the idea of fasting difficult or unappealing. Now, for someone who is considering trying IF, after talking to their doctor, of course,
Of course.
what practical tips or considerations do the sources offer to make it work better?
Well, they reiterate that there's typically an adjustment period, usually the first 1 to 2 weeks, where those initial side effects like headaches, hunger, maybe irritability are most common. Be prepared for that.
And anything to help with those side effects.
Increasing water intake, especially during the fasting period, can be very helpful for managing headaches, which are often linked to dehydration.
Okay. What about exercise? Can you work out while fasting, or should you avoid it?
Generally, yes, you can exercise. The sources suggest that moderate to even high-intensity exercise is usually feasible during fasting periods. As we mentioned, some people even report feeling more energetic for workouts once adapted.
Any tips on timing exercise?
One specific tip mentioned for those doing alternate day fasting or the 5.2 pattern was to maybe consume the low-calorie meal allowed on the fast day after completing your exercise session for the day.
Ah, okay. Refuel afterwards. Now, during the eating window, is it really just a free-for-all, eat whatever you want?
Absolutely not. This is a point the sources stress repeatedly. The quality of your diet during the eating window is paramount.
So what should people focus on?
Focus on nutrient-dense foods. Plenty of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean proteins, healthy fats. Think along the lines of that Mediterranean pattern, actually. This ensures you're getting adequate essential nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and fiber.
Right.
Just because you fasted doesn't mean you can compensate by loading up on processed foods, sugary drinks, and junk food during your eating hours. That would undermine many of the potential health benefits.
And alcohol.
They also generally recommend avoiding alcohol, especially on the low-calorie fast days if you're doing ADF or 5.2.
Good reminder. And does personalizing the timing help?
It seems so. One study found that tailoring the eating window to fit your individual schedule made it easier for people to stick with IF long-term.
Like how?
Examples included maybe waiting at least an hour after waking before breaking your fast, and importantly, finishing your eating window at least 3 hours before going to sleep. This might help better align with circadian rhythms and potentially improve sleep quality.
Okay, practical tips. So pulling it all together now after this deep dive into your sources. Does intermittent fasting work? What's the bottom line?
Well, the sources strongly suggest that yes, it can be an effective strategy, particularly for achieving weight loss and for improving several key cardiometabolic health markers.
Like blood sugar and cholesterol.
Exactly. Blood sugar control, insulin sensitivity, certain cholesterol levels like triglycerides and HDL, and diastolic blood pressure. For these kinds of outcomes, it often shows results that are comparable to traditional continuous calorie restriction.
And the potential benefits might extend beyond just those more established areas.
Yes, the mechanisms being explored like metabolic switching, the really intriguing research into autophagy and cellular cleanup, and the potential, though still speculative, links to longevity and neurodegenerative protection, these represent exciting areas of ongoing study.
But, always a but, it needs to be balanced with the reality of the downsides and risks.
Crucially, You absolutely have to weigh those potential benefits against the common initial side effects, the absolute necessity of maintaining high nutritional quality during the eating periods, and the very clear fact that it is simply not suitable or safe for certain individuals.
Like pregnant women, teens, people with eating disorder history.
Precisely. And anyone with specific health conditions or on medications needs that medical consult first.
And the research picture is still developing, isn't it?
Yes, many sources emphasize that while there's significant evidence, particularly for weight and metabolic health, much of the human research is still relatively short term. We definitely need more large-scale, long-term studies to fully understand the sustained effects, any potential long-term risks, and the overall sustainability of different IF patterns over many years.
And that universal recommendation.
Talk to your doctor. Always. The sources are unanimous. Consult a healthcare professional before starting intermittent fasting, especially if you have any existing health conditions or are taking medications. It's fundamentally about finding a safe, effective, and sustainable approach that works for you as an individual.
This has been incredibly helpful in clarifying what the science, based on these sources, really says about intermittent fasting. It's definitely more complex than the headlines.
It certainly paints a much more detailed and balanced picture than you often get from just scrolling social media.
Absolutely. So, for you, our listener, here's maybe something to consider as you process all this information. Given that intermittent fasting and traditional calorie restriction appear to achieve similar outcomes for many people when it comes to weight loss, and that both require careful planning and consistent adherence to be effective, what personal factors like your daily schedule, your food preferences, maybe your personality, or simply which approach feels more realistic and less burdensome for your life might make one of these methods a potentially better fit for your own health journey than the other. Something to think about.